You're listening to Meg's story, a daughter with Idiopathic Thrombocytopenic Purpura, ITP. Hi, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. When your child is sick, the whole world seems to stop in its tracks. Plans and priorities change, and your number one job becomes figuring out how to get your child well again. For some of us, rest, medications, and relaxation can do the trick. But for others, it takes more. It takes countless doctor appointments, invasive medical testing, therapy, surgeries, the list goes on, and then you still may not have all of the answers or results you were hoping for. This podcast features parents of children that have an illness or medical condition and gives them a place to share their own journeys and experiences. We will talk about the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but one thing seems to remain the same. Children are resilient and teach us more about ourselves and the world than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for lending a listening ear and opening up your heart to these families and this podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor.
I describe it like a backpack. It's not that heavy and it's not that uncomfortable. But if you wear it day in and day out, it's like sometimes you just want to put it down and you can't.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. I hope that you are staying well and healthy and sane as we are enduring this crazy time of life during the coronavirus pandemic. You know, it's really interesting. I started this podcast in 2017, and we have had so many amazing parents share their stories in an effort to find and offer connection when illness and a sick kid can just make you feel so isolated and alone. And then here we are 3 years later, and I actually think this podcast has never been more relevant. As we are all just feeling so isolated from others, it's just an honor to have this platform to connect parents. And the truth is, I think this podcast is really relevant to many different populations, parents who have kids facing medical situations and also parents who don't. We're just kind of at that point in our crazy quarantine world where it's nice to hear parents express so many of the same feelings and emotions we feel every day. Worry, concern, unexpected gut feelings that stay with us. But then we're also learning from these parents how to cope with those feelings, how to cope with trials, how to cope with difficult things, and how to work through that hard stuff. There's just so much to learn here. So let's go ahead and get started with Meg's story. You'll hear how her gut instinct about her daughter's unusual bruising caused her concern and to sound the alarm with her pediatricians, and ultimately led her to a diagnosis of ITP. So let's go ahead and get started, and here's my conversation with Meg.
My name is Meg Casano, and my husband's name is John. We met in college at Villanova University, and we've been married for 15 years. I grew up in a town outside of Syracuse, New York, and my husband grew up in Westchester County, New York. And after we got married, we kind of bounced around a little bit on the East Coast, but we settled in Fairfield, Connecticut about 7 years ago. We have 4 girls, ages 13, 12, 9, and 8.
That's a lot of girls.
Ella. It is, but girls are great.
They are.
They are great.
Oh. And so tell me about who we're going to be talking about today.
So we are going to be talking about Ella, who is our oldest daughter, and she's 13 now.
Okay, gotcha. And tell us about Ella's story.
Ella was born on July 28th in 2006. I had a very easy and joyful pregnancy with her. I felt really good. I really prepared. I was very, John and I were both very, very excited for her arrival. She was born pretty quickly without any complications in New York City. And of course, you know, as a typical new baby, we thought everything she did was absolutely miraculous and magical, and no baby has ever done anything as wonderful as Ella ever had before. tons and tons of photos.
For sure.
But she really was actually, looking back, she really is kind of an unusual kid. She was always very focused. She actually, interestingly, she did cry a lot for her first 4 months. She was one of those babies, I guess most people would say, was colicky. Looking back, I'm not really sure if we missed something or her pediatrician missed something, if something was bothering her tummy and we just didn't appreciate it or what, but she certainly cried a lot. I would start calling my husband around 5, like, when are you coming home? When are you coming home?
Yeah.
'Cause if she wasn't being held, she was crying. And she was not one of those babies you could put in the stroller and take a walk, or put in her bucket and have a meal in a restaurant and she'd sit there and look at you. She screamed every time we got in the car. Pretty much if I wasn't doing deep knee bends at a certain pace, you get like that certain movement, your baby likes.
Yes.
She would cry. And so I would basically do deep knee bends with her all day.
Yeah.
John would come home, literally put on his gym clothes and do deep knee bends with her.
Oh my gosh.
The other thing that she loved and would stop her crying was this little book we had called Over the Ocean. And I probably read that book to her 100 times a day. She would stop crying as soon as I got it out. We would sit on the couch, and by 4 months old, not even joking, she could turn the pages on the book. She would kind of bat the cardboard page and turn the page and turn the page. That's how often we read this book. And
wow.
I sometimes wonder if that's, I don't know, she always was so into language and writing. I mean, to this day, she still loves to write, and she's very cerebral that way. And then the other thing that would stop her crying was listening to this Celine Dion CD, the Lullaby CD. And we would listen to that over and over. And again, to this day, I mean, she has a beautiful voice. She's a wonderful singer. And I don't know if it's because of all the Celine Dion we listen to, or if she always had this innate ability and that's why she liked Celine Dion. I don't know.
Right. Wow.
But, once we got past that 4-month mark, things really settled down, and she kind of woke up and stopped crying. And I swear, since then, she's never given us a day of trouble in her life. She's like, it's such a joy and a blessing to parent this child. I mean, I really just feel so fortunate.
She got it all out of the way at the beginning.
Yes.
Made you work for it.
So.
And she's like, all right, you passed the test, Mom and Dad. You now get a break.
I think so. And, so then I would say after the first 4 months, her development in many ways was very typical. In some ways she was advanced, like with her language and her speech that developed very early. By 7-8 months, she was saying words, and by 1, she was putting 2 words together, and by 2, she was saying like paragraphs.
Wow.
And then and same with writing and reading. Other things she was a little slower with, like movement, crawling. I remember trying to like tease her with a Cheerio to try to get her to move or roll or do something. She was pretty content to just sort of look around and watch her world. Gosh, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say it was around her 3-year-old checkup. That was the first time I actually mentioned to the pediatrician that I felt like maybe she was getting a lot of bruises, because what I was noticing was, she would take a typical fall or tumble like toddlers do, but she seemed to get these really deep, dark, kind of big bruises that just seemed more than the injury, I felt. And so I asked the pediatrician about it, and the pediatrician just kind of said, well, they're in pretty typical locations, like on her shins, sometimes her arm a little bit. They weren't in odd locations. And she said, I think she's just an active kid. And then I remember my mother-in-law said, yeah, I bruise easily too. And she probably just has more sensitive skin. And so, I kind of was like, okay, well, what do I know? And so we just kind of didn't really think anything of it. But it just, I don't know, I guess it kind of stuck in the back of my head. And so then we moved to a different state, a different city, and we had a new pediatrician. And so again, at like her next checkup, I mentioned it again, I feel like she gets a lot of bruises. And again, I was told by a different pediatrician in a different state, like, oh, I don't think it's anything. It just, they kind of look normal to me. And, so, I hadn't really found that voice as a mother yet, I guess, where I felt like I should have said, no, I don't think this is normal. I think there's something wrong here. I didn't have that confidence. So again, I kind of let it go, and it may have been normal at that time.
Sure.
It's hard to say looking back, but so this kind of went on for a few years actually. And it wasn't until we moved to Fairfield and Ella was 7 at that point, and she'd been doing a lot of playing outside. We had gotten the kids one of those swing set kind of things, and one of the swings had chains. The chains are wrapped in a material so that they don't pinch the child, but it's kind of hard. And she would shimmy up the chain, like up to the top. And she would just shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. And she came inside and she had huge bruises all up and down the insides of her legs and up her thighs, like exactly where she had been gripping the chain.
Wow.
And I kind of was like, oh my gosh, I just do not think this is normal. I really feel like I need to say something again. So I took her to our pediatrician who we have now. And she said, yeah, that does look like a lot of bruising. And she kind of said, in order to explore this a little more, we are going to have to do a blood draw. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I mean, I don't want that for her, but okay. I'm not asking for this, but I think we need to do something. I think we need to check.
Right.
And so, the pediatrician said, okay, and they ordered the blood work, which Ella had. And she said, it's probably nothing. So just, you can send her back to school. Which I did. And it was like a few hours later, I got a phone call from the pediatrician saying, we got her blood work back, and I think there's been a mistake in the test because her platelet level is so low. I've actually never seen it this low. I think that there must have been some clumping. Like, I guess they're supposed to sort of agitate the tube after they draw the blood so
right.
that the platelets don't stick together. And she said, I think it was just a faulty test. You're going to have to bring her back in. So I said, okay. And I said, well, we schedule it. And she said, no, go get her at school right now and bring her back.
Wow.
So I did. I went to school and brought her back to the doctor. They took another blood test, and sure enough, same result.
Wow.
So then they realized right away it was not a faulty test. Her platelets were, in fact, I think they were like below 10,000.
Oh my gosh.
Which is really low.
And I guess for listeners, what is a normal amount of platelets to have in your body?
What we have been told is that a normal amount of platelets is anywhere between 150 and 450,000 per microliter of blood. So she was below 10,000. Just to give a little perspective,
right.
Most doctors would not do any type of surgery on a patient whose platelets are below 90,000. Mm. And most of the time, if someone is below 50,000, they're told, like, you shouldn't really do any activities or leave your house. So she was below 10,000.
Wow.
So that, of course, began a cascade of really rapid events, like finding a specialist and making the referral and setting up appointments, all of which happened very quickly within a span of just a couple of days. And thankfully we live in an area of the country where we are right between, Yale, New Haven, and some of the best hospitals in New York City. And so we were able to very quickly get set up at Yale. And I want to say it took about a week. There was a lot of blood work done. There were some other tests, x-rays, and based on the results of the tests, the doctors were able to determine that Ella did not have a platelet production problem, because they were able to see that she was making a lot of the baby platelets, the reticulocytes they're called. So they knew she was producing platelets, which was good because that meant her bone marrow was probably okay. So she was having a platelet destruction problem. And after a little more investigation, they told us that it was something called Idiopathic Thrombocytopenic Purpura, or ITP, which was an autoimmune disease where her body was attacking its own platelets and destroying them. And they said, but, don't worry, because this is something that, sometimes is brought on by a virus or other type of, injury or event to the body. And almost all the time, kids clear this on their own within 6 to 12 months. So we, were worried, of course, and we weren't really sure what Ella was going to have to go through, but we did believe at that time that within just a few months, everything would be over and life would kind of be back to normal.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. You're kind of like going through a roller coaster of, I think something's wrong. Well, probably something's not wrong. Oh, now something is wrong. And
Right.
Just like back and forth, having to go between being completely scared and then feeling a little bit better about it and then back to scared is a lot.
Yeah. And of course, we were most worried about some type of leukemia or bone marrow problem. And when we learned it was ITP, it's funny because we felt relieved almost that, okay, this is something we can deal with. It'll be over soon and kind of life will go back to normal.
Right.
So it's funny how I guess you think it could be worse.
It's the perspective. Yeah. And so is this something, I guess take us from there and do you remember at all kind of looking back that whirlwind? I guess you had 3 other kids at that time when you were trying to balance all of this and manage your other kids, your house, and Ella's appointments. And what was that like?
Right. Yeah, I guess to back up a little bit more, I had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease myself. I want to say like 1 to 2 years prior. Mm-hmm. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and I was having to get I still do get infusions myself every 8 weeks. And so then when we found out Ella had to get infusions, and actually I'm trying to think if I was even getting I don't think I was even getting my infusions at that point. I think I was doing shots. I had to do shots in my stomach every 2 weeks. I think that's what I was doing then.
Gosh.
And I was feeling awful.
Right.
I was not controlled Crohn's disease at that point. I was very, very sick. I had lost tons and tons of weight. I could barely leave my house.
Oh.
I could barely take the kids for a walk. The kids saw me taken to the hospital in an ambulance more than once.
Gosh.
I was really struggling. And then when we found out she was diagnosed, it was like, okay, we literally can't do this. So we did get an au pair for 2 years. And that, I guess in some ways it's not something that was easy for us to afford.
Right.
And it's definitely something that's, I think, well, that and medical bills and co-pays, I think has really taken its toll on us as a family financially over this last decade. But it's something that we could not have gotten through everything without help. There was no way.
Yeah.
We did have some family who was nearby, for part of the year and very helpful and supportive when they could be. But I mean, the listeners know sometimes there are multiple, between Ella and me, there were multiple appointments, sometimes just in 1 week.
Right.
And then having 3 other kids who at that time were like, gosh, I mean, Hannah must have been 1. They were like 1, 3, 5, and 7.
Oh my gosh, Meg.
It was a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And so, walk us through how you guys talked to Ella and I guess the other girls about what was happening inside her body. How, she's a pretty resilient kid. How did you guys talk to her about it?
Yeah. Well, I think what we tried to do was explain what platelets were and why they were important. And so we talked to her a little bit about how, we kind of said things like, how when you get a little cut and your body makes a scab. And so we sort of talked to her about how when you don't have enough platelets in your body, it's hard to make a scab. And so sometimes you could bleed a little more than would be safe for you. And so we just kind of explained to her that the doctors could give her medicine through a little tiny tube in her arm and that it would help her be able to make scabs better. That's kind of how she explained it to people for the first couple of years.
I think that's a perfect explanation because it's tangible. Everybody has had a scar experience, and
right.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I cannot say this about all my kids, so it's not like it's a me thing. It's just an Ella thing. Somehow she has always she's just had sort of this resignation, but not in a, what's the word I'm looking for? She's no shrinking violet. She's not like, do whatever you want to me. It's not that. It's just that she kind of understood in a very mature way, even as a young child, that this was something that I have to do.
Right.
And I'm not going to like it, but I'm just going to do it.
Right.
And she never, we talked to her about it's okay to be scared. It's okay to cry. We don't want you to hurt the nurse or kick the nurse, but these are some other things you could do. You could hug the pillow, you could, but she never really needed any of that.
Right.
She always just handled, I used to say cause I practiced as a nurse before I had all the kids and she handled her IVs better than a lot of adults.
I'm sure.
I do not know how.
It's almost like a level of wisdom, like beyond her years, that she was like, there are things I can control and things I can't. Yeah. And that's pretty amazing to have that kind of an example in the child that you're raising.
Yeah, it was very incredible and inspiring. And, I think it made everyone else's job around her easier too, when you don't have to hold a child down, which is very traumatic for everyone involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And so walk us through what you guys have done, I guess, after she started having to get her infusions and what helped her kind of cope with all of this.
Let's see. Well, when Ella gets her infusions itself, particularly when she was younger,
And
Of
I guess
course.
just suffice it to say, it did last more than the 6 months to 1 year, correct?
Oh, yes. Here we are 6.5 years later, still going. Um, yes. When she gets her infusions, not so much anymore, but particularly in those first several years, the distractions were really key for her. Of course, having an iPad handy, right, is
For
always
sure.
nice, to have something to look at or a game to play.
No screen time rules in the hospital. That's one of my mottos.
Yeah, pretty much. No. And at that time, she hardly had any TV at all. So
Right.
having an iPad was very rewarding and distracting.
That's great.
The environment was really important. I think knowing she got to kind of see the toy cupboard ahead of time and know that she was going to get a toy afterwards. That was a really big treat for her at that time. A lot of the sometimes she would get a gift pack that someone had donated or a backpack, those kinds of things. It really, really did make a difference for those first several years. Again, now I would say she's done this so many times and, a little less so. But definitely in those first several years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about what you guys have created through all of this, and how did this idea that you guys are now working on come to fruition?
Do you want me to just talk quickly about kind of like sort of the cycle of what she goes through?
Please do. Yes,
now?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So when Ella gets her infusion, she gets IVIG through her IV, and the way it was explained to us this is probably very simplistic, but just that it sort of almost like coats her platelets or makes it so that her body doesn't recognize her platelets as foreign anymore. And so her body stops attacking them for a little while. And so because she's producing platelets all the time, but not destroying them, for a little while, her platelets go way back up to normal. And in the beginning, we were constantly checking her platelets. What are they this week? What are they this week? So, this poor child was having blood draws, and they weren't finger sticks at that time, because at that, something about, I guess, the way the blood comes out of the finger, or is it squeezed as it's comes out of the finger, it could have, I guess, the result could not be as accurate. So these were full on blood draws every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, to try to figure out how well is the IVIG working? How long is it going to last? What are her platelets doing? How safe is she? And so what we've learned over time is that the IVIG does boost her platelets up for several weeks, about 4 weeks or so. And then she's way back down in like the 50s. And then over the next 4 weeks, she drops down to more like the 10s and 20s. And so, for the first month after her IVIG, we all kind of leave her alone. She's a normal kid. But like that second month is when my anxiety kind of goes into overdrive, because she's really not safe enough for any type of medical procedure, surgery, or, I'm just always worried, God forbid there was an accident, a serious broken bone. Something that you just can't control. Kind of that month of time when her platelets are low, but she hasn't gotten her IVIG yet.
Yeah. Gosh. It's almost like you want to wrap her up in bubble wrap and just...
I do.
Yes, yeah.
I know. Well, and we have made some changes to her life. When she was younger, she played on a little rec soccer team in our town. And by the time she got to about 3rd grade, 4th grade, the doctors said, the girls are really getting much bigger and stronger. You probably need to start limiting when she can play. So there was like a season where maybe she could play some games, but she couldn't play for some games. And we were constantly having to check her platelets before each game to see where she was. And it just really began to take its toll on her. So she's sort of drifted into other activities now that are always safe for her, even when her platelets are low.
Right.
And so, not all kids with ITP do that, but for her, she has, she loves to sing, and she can always sing even when her platelets are low. So she does have some things that, that those kinds of changes have been really helpful for her, I think, emotionally and socially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when she's waiting on that second month to get that second infusion, is she on edge too? Is she kind of, now that she's older, starting to manage it herself?
She does. She's gotten better as she's gotten older. There would, when she was a little younger, there would be times where I'd go outside and see her, climbing a tree or something. I'm like, honey, you can't do that right now. You have to know that you've got to start making those decisions. And, so now she is much better with that. Of course, it's the things I worry about though, just riding in cars.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Just,
yes.
Things, just daily living things.
What do you do to help manage, or I guess take care of yourself kind of through all this? I mean, you've got Crohn's disease yourself, which it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
To take care of, to say the least.
I mean, those years when I was so sick and she was so sick and the kids were all so little. And, I look back, I was a mess. I was so anxious, and I would have like nightmares, but I call them like daymares. Like I would literally see these horrific events, like horrific. I'm going to say it because maybe it'll benefit another parent, but like I would see the tragic deaths of my child unfolding, like in my mind, which I now know is a form of anxiety and OCD. But at that time, I didn't know that. And I would just be like paralyzed by these visions. And it was awful. It was, and it took, I finally sort of said, I can't live like this. My husband said, listen, there's got to be a doctor around here who is like, this is what he does. And he or she is the most amazing person at helping people like you. Mm-hmm. And so I found my doctor, and he literally saved my life.
Wow.
And put me into remission with my Crohn's disease. And I think that was sort of the first step. And I did other things too. I started doing acupuncture. I started doing this super intense holistic diet. I was so desperate to be able to live and function again that I would do anything.
Right.
And once I think I started physically feeling a little better, it allowed me to kind of then be able to take that into the kids, be able to be a better mother, I was able to find a network of people in my community. I'm now part of a Bible study of women who really help and support me. And I started, once I was feeling better, I could exercise again. These are things that I just never thought I would be able to do. And so I would say my self-care has allowed me to be able to cope and handle all of this. But that's really taken place over the last few years. It's not like I've always been totally functional and with it.
Well, you're definitely not alone in the feelings and the visions and the anxiety that you have. And, not that you need a reason or something to happen to have those thoughts, because we can all just have them. But, if you could, tell another parent who's maybe at the beginning of a journey that's similar to yours and Ella's, how would you support them? Or I don't know if you have connected with other families that have ITP. What are some of the words of wisdom that you give them?
We really haven't connected with many families of kids who have chronic ITP.
Right.
I think making that switch from sort of, okay, I'm sure she'll outgrow it in 6 to 12 months to, okay, she'll probably never outgrow it.
Yeah.
It sort of became this weight that you just realized this is never going to stop. like how sometimes I just don't want to deal with this. I just don't want to think about it. I don't want to worry about her. I describe it like a backpack. It's not that heavy and it's not that uncomfortable, but if you wear it day in and day out, it's like sometimes you just want to put it down and you can't. And so for other families, whether they're going through something chronic like ITP or chronic like a lot of other illnesses and diseases, I know this sounds so cliche, but just keep the faith, because there were so many times that I thought, like, is this it? Like, is this the most, at the time I was in my 30s, feeling so sick, having a child who was sick, having all these little babies. And I was like, really, is this the most, is this the best I'm going to feel? And I couldn't see what was coming. And it really took my husband to say to me, give yourself 1 year, just find the best doctors you can and give yourself 1 year and see how you feel 1 year from now. Mm. And that's a long time. He wasn't like, oh, give yourself a week and see how.
No, that takes discipline to wait.
Yeah. But I needed to hear that from someone. I needed to hear, like, this isn't going to be a week. This isn't going to be, a month or two, but don't make any judgments about yourself or how you're feeling until it's been at least a year. Mm. And I kind of was like, okay, I can do that.
Right.
And, so I guess, and each year after that, I've sort of, then I get to that year and I sort of say, okay, let me see after another year. And, maybe for some people a year is too long. Maybe they really do want to say, you know what, let me just see where I am in a month. I knew we needed longer than a month. Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, just kind of, you don't have to thrive for a little while when you're in the thick of it. You just have to survive. And later you'll feel like living and thriving again. But everything is so new and your child is so sick and you're so, caught up with all the emotions that go along with that, just be really kind to yourself and trust and have faith that something good can come out of it. And you might not be able to see it, but you still have to kind of have faith that it will happen someday.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really good advice. And you say it in such a profound way. And you guys have found something that's good out of this. And it's kind of what Ella created. Is that right?
So Ella created MediTeddy. And if this is not a redemption story, I do not know what is, because I'm a spiritual person. I hope your listeners don't mind, but I just feel like this is not us. This is happening through us. This whole project, MediTeddy, has a life of its own. And I do believe there's divine work here going on. I don't know how other people interpret things in their lives, but for me personally, I think that there's a lot of suffering that's been going on here. And, that we can't always make that go away, but we can sort of take it and turn it into something good. And so MediTeddy is actually started as a school project for Ella when she was in 5th grade. Our state many states do have something called the Invention Convention, where the kids are prompted to come up with an invention. And, this had kind of been on her mind. She wanted to do something that would help kids like her. And so she came up with MediTeddy, which is this cute little sleeve that she can slip on, she or the nurse or whoever can slip over her IV bag, and it camouflages it in a very adorable way. But from the back, The sleeve is small and mesh, and the doctors and nurses can still easily see the medicine, so they can visually monitor it.
Right.
And what I didn't realize, we adults focus so heavily on getting the IV part of medical care. The needle goes in and there's there are iPads and bubbles and music and toys and candy, all kinds of distractions that are going on during the getting the needle part, as there should be. But then when that's over, there's, kind of this like boring waiting period where you're getting medication. And I didn't really ever think about how little Ella, as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, would be looking around that hospital environment and actually feel overwhelmed by the equipment that was in the room. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about that. But she told us later that she would look at the big bag of medicine hanging on her IV pole, and she would think in her head, all of that has to go inside of me. Mm-hmm. Like, that felt really overwhelming to her, and she didn't like to look at it. And that never crossed my mind. And then at the end of her infusion, she would get toys and prizes and stickers. And so there was sort of that part of it too, but there was just sort of this no man's land in the middle where, there might be arts and crafts or a game or watching a movie. But as far as what was going on in the room around her, it was still pretty medical and sterile.
Right.
And so, kind of back to her school project, she created her first Medi Teddy by cutting up a stuffed animal in her room. And I had bought her some mesh, and she hot glued a little mesh pouch on the back. And, we brought it in to her nurses at Yale, and they, gave her some feedback, and she kind of played around with the design a little bit. And then, she had to write up, probably make a trifold board or something like that for her presentation.
Sure.
And she just got such encouragement from her teachers and the principal of her school. So, I would say too, for any teachers out there listening, I kind of was like, oh, this is really cute. Like as a nurse, I knew I hadn't seen anything like this before, but man, the teachers were like, oh my gosh, Ella, you have to do something with this. You have to try to, this is so great. I think that you really could make these for other kids. And it was really the support of her teachers, I think, that really allowed her to believe in her idea too.
Right. Gosh, yeah. Us as adults we have such an important job of supporting children in their dreams, and such an impact that her teachers had that have made this incredible, no longer a project, but a company.
Yes. So kind of long story short, after that, typical Ella, from the time she was 4 months old, trying to figure out how to turn the pages in her book, this idea got lodged in her brain, and she couldn't let it go. She kept asking John and me, what do you think I should do next? What do you think I should do next? And we were kind of like, well, I don't know. And I think my husband was the one who said, well, why don't you write a business plan?
Yeah.
And so in 6th grade, as part of a independent study project that she had with her school, she did. She researched, how do you do a business plan? What's in a business plan? And she wrote this whole, I think it was like 12 or 14 pages long in 6th grade.
Oh my gosh.
And it had graphs. She looked up how much materials would cost. And, when it came time for kind of like the financial piece of it, she was like, but, I really want to just give these to kids.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, well, I don't know. How would you do that? And so we sort of we didn't know how it was going to happen. We knew that's what she wanted. And so we just sort of tabled that part of it for a little while. And in the meantime, I started the process of getting a patent for her, which is now pending, which is very exciting.
That is.
Yeah. And I started the process of registering MediTeddy as an actual company. The nonprofit application came a little later, like the next year, but I started some of the behind the scenes things that she couldn't do. And then we sort of got to this place where we felt stuck. Like, she had this idea. She had this cute little prototype that she made in her room with a hot glue gun.
Right.
We had a patent on the idea. So now we felt like we could sort of take it more public. Right. But we didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So I actually contacted a local philanthropist in our town who has a little ice cream shop, and he does all kinds of charity work for people all over our town. And I just said to him, would you mind if I brought Ella in to talk to you, and maybe you could just give her a little advice? And he said, yeah, sure. Bring her down to the ice cream shop. So Ella goes in with her laptop and her little prototype right there in the ice cream shop with the old, the counter with the old fashioned stools. And
how cool.
It was like out of a movie, and he's sitting there, and he's got 2 other men with him. So there are 3 grown men sitting at this counter, and they're like, all right, let's see what you got. And she gets on her little laptop and she talks to them about MediTeddy, and, she goes through her whole thing, and she said, I want to give this to kids. And he said, kind of looked at her for a minute, and he's like, I love it. Oh. I think it's great. So again, that encouragement, like it could have died right there.
Yeah.
And he said, this is what you need to do. You need to find someone who will make these for you. You need to find out how much it's going to cost. And if you can't find any money to make this happen, I will make it happen for you.
Wow.
And so there again, like, she had sort of that, like, okay, I know I have someone who will help me.
Yeah.
And I felt like that too.
Right.
And so then I just sent out a bunch of emails cold to toy companies in our area. And this one guy named Josh Livingston wrote right back to me. He seemed super nice and friendly. And as it turns out, his company, New England Toy, as it turns out, he is super nice and friendly. He is exactly what he seemed like. He's been so helpful. And he said, yeah, we can do this. This is what we have to do. Because this was his thing. He knows how to manufacture things. So he really mentored Ella and I through how do you make a prototype and iterations of a prototype and how much does it cost. And so that actually was easy because Josh was so nice to work with.
Wow.
And then once we had the prototype, Josh said, okay, we do have a minimum order. You can't just like order 10, mm-hmm. And so that's when we knew we needed $5,000. But, financially, with all, years of medical bills and co-pays and illness. And by the way, Ella's not our only child with a chronic illness. So we are just a family of things going on. It wasn't like we could just say, okay, honey, here's $5,000.
Yeah.
Make your dreams come true.
Sure.
I wish we could. So we said, you want this to be a nonprofit. That means you're going to have to raise some money at some point. Now's a good time as any. Why don't we do a GoFundMe and see if anyone wants to donate? And, remembering too that we also had the man in our town who had said he would help if she needed. So she started the GoFundMe, and, cause we wanted to make 500, and she wanted to bring them to kids in hospitals around us. I thought we would be loading my car with some crates of MediTeddies. And like my thinking was we would kind of be like begging people like, oh, here, it's a school project. Will you take a few, try them out? See, obviously totally wrong on that too. Cause the GoFundMe went viral and, brought in more than enough money. We actually ended up ordering 2,000 MediTeddies.
Wow.
And, oh my gosh, it's just been such a crazy ride since then. They came in October and they're gone already. So
wow.
in just 3 months,
oh my gosh.
I had to learn how to ship and pack and, print mailing labels and measure boxes and learn about taxes and customs, and because now we've shipped them to 23 countries and 47 states.
Wow. Oh, I just keep saying wow because I am
I know.
so impressed.
I'm telling you, it's not us. It is happening through us, but it's a million people along the way. And I know that sounds so cliche and so trite, but it is so true. They're just every person who, this has not been like, oh, we have one big benefactor and Daddy Warbucks who's making, this has literally been like hundreds and thousands of people doing a tiny bit to make this what it is.
Right.
It's like so incredible. It's really just kept me going.
That's amazing. Well, it's such an incredible product. It makes a difference. It changes the game for kids who are going through situations that are tough. And then so that in fact helps parents, and it makes people feel good when they're able to give it. I mean, it's an inspiring product for sure. And Medi Teddy is the cutest name.
I know people ask, well, how'd you come up with the name Medi Teddy? And this I do, Ella and I say, weren't we, it was like a family dinner and we were all sitting around the table brainstorming, names of different products. Like, what about this? What about this? And, finally, I don't remember who actually said the words Medi Teddy, but that just seemed like a good fit. And then it was funny though, because her prototype was a penguin. And so we were kind of like, well, Medi Penguin? Like, that doesn't work. So when we were working on the prototype with Josh from the toy company, she said, it really should be a teddy bear. And so that's when it became a teddy bear.
Thank you so much for listening to Meg's story. She has so much insight and helpful advice for other parents, so please share her story. Meg also wants you to know that you can get a Medi Teddy for free. They actually give Medi Teddies to kids for free. So if you are a parent and you would like for your child to have one on their medications or their tube feeds, you can go to the website medi-teddy.org, click receive, and access the coupon codes for free shipping and a free Medi Teddy. Meg asks, however, if you are a grandparent or an aunt or a friend of a family and you would like to send one to another child, you're welcome to do that, but she asks that you do please purchase the Medi Teddy. You can follow the form at their website to learn how to do that. There are also so many other ways to get Medi Teddies to kids and in hospitals, so if you're working in a hospital and you want to find out how to provide them to the kids that you serve, go ahead and head to their website. Again, thank you for listening. Please share this podcast and make sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook to get the latest information and resources. And also, in case you haven't heard, I wrote a book and it has amazing illustrations by Hannah Kate Designs. It's called The Super Silly Wash Your Hands Dance, and it's available for under $10 on Amazon. We created this resource to add a little bit of fun into this otherwise crazy time of staying isolated and germ-free. So I hope that you enjoy it. I think it's also great for parents as they leave the hospital, or if they're a NICU parent and they're trying to describe to the siblings how important hand washing is. I just think it's a really cool tool. We also have a coloring book that is available for under $5, and you can find that on childlifepodcast.com. So thank you again for listening. Y'all stay safe, stay clean, and until next time, thank you for listening.